Hello everyone! Arlecchino's first beta changes are in, and although the first one usually only has minor changes, this time around, HOYOMiX has made some small but pretty significant updates to Arlecchino's kit that address some of her biggest issues. If you're still not familiar with what Arlecchino does, I highly recommend watching my initial overview video on her first. It should give some much needed context on the information I'm about to share in this video. So with that, let's get straight into what changed. First, let's talk about her drip. I think we all know that if you want Arlecchino to be attacking enemies with an actual scythe, pulling her signature weapon is needed. If you do use any other polearm, however, the weapon will resemble her scythe when she attacks by showing a yellow transparent extension at the end of the polearm. With this update, they made this more visible, so you technically don't need her signature. In my opinion, the signature looks way better as this looks more like an extension tacked on, but hey, at least everyone gets to attack with a scythe in some way. Now onto the various changes to her actual kit. They added a new movement mechanic for her. After you charge the attack, if you just hold it, she'll start floating with her wing and gain increased mobility for 3 seconds while consuming stamina. It sounds like Wanderer flying, but its mechanics are actually more similar to Mona and Ayaka's alternate sprints, with Arlecchino's being slightly faster than theirs. It's a very small exploration quality of life since for some reason it only lasts 3 seconds, so this is more just Arlecchino being able to look cool. Next, a small clarification to her C1. They added a trigger interval of 0.1 seconds to it. All this does is prevent Arlecchino from potentially gaining a lot of bond from one attack in AoE. For instance, if she hits 3 enemies without the interval, she could theoretically get 15% bond from one normal attack. This text just clarifies that you can't do that. Now on to the more important changes. Originally, the 40% pyro damage buff that Arlecchino got was in her normal talent, and it needed the greater than or equal to 30% bond requirement that is tied to her infusion for the pyro damage bonus to apply. They moved this clause to her special passive that prevents her from healing. Effectively, this change makes her have permanent 40% pyro damage in combat. Damage wise, this doesn't change anything because all your hits should have been buffed, but this does alter the rotation so that it helps with her energy requirements when compared to before. In my tentative rotation that I laid out in my first video, I mentioned that you wanted to delay your burst usage until after consuming the Blood Death with her charged attack so you can buff your ult. Now you can safely skill into ult and the ult will still be buffed by the pyro damage bonus. And this way, Arlecchino can immediately catch the particles she creates after using her skill, which will get her burst back faster. Afterwards, you can do the same as before, set up support skills, switch back to Arlecchino to gain the bond with her charged attack, and then go ham with her normal attacks. Next, her skill healing got a pretty huge buff. Originally, the skill healed 100% of the consumed bond of life. So if Arlecchino had 30% bond of life and you used your skill, and this was the scenario for C0 Arlecchino after the first rotation, you would heal 30% HP. Now, the healing is doubled, so if you had 30% bond, you would now heal for 60% HP. And this is really big as it addresses one of Arlecchino's weaknesses, survivability when being unable to heal. With the buff, you're gaining back a lot more HP after your first rotation, so as long as you didn't take too much damage, you should be able to full heal at the start of every new rotation. Now in regard to the Arlecchino Farina pairing, this buff does help its survivability a bit with the larger heal after each rotation. However, you still have the issues of less fanfare stacking and Arlecchino's squishiness in combat as she's being HP drained by Farina. So while this healing change does help, the core downside still exists. There was another small change to her skill. Basically, originally you had 20 seconds after each skill to gain your bond of life through charged attacking enemies with blood debt or killing them. Now you have 35 seconds, so there's just like a small quality of life change, nothing too drastic. And lastly, the most significant buff to Arlecchino's kit for this beta cycle. Her bond of life consumption when attacking with her enhanced and infused normal attacks was decreased from 5.5% to 4% of the current bond of life. At the time I'm recording this change isn't even documented in the beta text description yet. However, I'm fairly confident this change is true because of multiple reliable sources reporting the same thing. Simply put, this change makes it so that Arlecchino consumes less bond of life as she's performing her enhanced normal attacks, which is the main source of her damage. Because of this, she'll overall have more bond of life. Her enhanced attacks do more damage with higher bond of life, so with this change she will do more damage. Remember, more bond of life equals more damage. They also decreased the bond consumption interval from 0.05 seconds to 0.03 seconds. All you need to know about this is that there's just a quality of life change to make sure Arlecchino is getting her enhanced hits properly. Now to go into a bit more detail about the bond consumption buff, I updated my sheet visualizing Arlecchino's bond of life percent and multiplier increase on her normal attacks as she hits an enemy. Normal attack combos are just repeated N6s, which I know aren't the best combos, but the important thing is just counting the number of hits here. Pyro infused hits are in red, and anything in bold is taken into account in the average values calculated at the bottom. Looking at the C0R0 sheet, we can see that with the change, you can get 7 more Pyro hits in, so if you want to on-field her longer, you do have the option. However, the buff's true value can be seen if we just compare the bond and damage multiplier values pre-buff and post-buff with the same number of hits, in this case 19 hits. You wouldn't want to on-field Arlecchino for too long anyway, so you can start your next rotation quicker. Comparing the averages, you can clearly see that Arlecchino gets more overall bond of life with the buff, and thus overall more damage multipliers on her normal attacks. Remember, since she's consuming less bond of life per auto attack after the changes, each normal attack multiplier will be a bit higher since she has more bond of life. But this buff not only increases her overall damage, it also increases her survivability in combination with the skill healing buff I mentioned earlier. Taking the combo in the sheet as an example, let's just say you end each rotation after 19 hits. Originally, you would end with about 30% bond, and thus will heal 30% HP after using your next skill. With the changes, you'll now end at about 40% bond, and thus heal 80% HP. So with more bond and the healing from skill being doubled, you'll pretty much get a full heal on Arlecchino at the start of every rotation. This allows for much more leeway in how well you have to play in combat. Now you can afford to lose more HP from enemy attacks, knowing that as long as you don't die on Arlecchino during one rotation as she's on-fielding, you'll pretty much full heal on her once you continue your subsequent rotations. Now I also updated the sheets for C0R1 with her signature weapon, so I'm just going to show this here. Pause if you like it, but pretty much same thing as the C0 that I explained. Overall, you get more bond of life, which means more damage on her normal attacks, and also gives you more healing. And that's all the changes that Arlecchino received for now. Overall, these are some great changes considering it's only the first week of beta. Buffing her survivability is great to make her practical gameplay feel a bit better, and damage buffs are always welcome. Now, do these changes completely fix her weaknesses? No, I think her biggest weakness currently is the lack of resistance to interruption unless you run a shield. But if you run a shielder in your team, you're sacrificing damage since most of her best team's sheet DPS wise can't fit in a shield. But due to the importance of Arlecchino performing her normal attacks and being really annoying if you just get interrupted out of them, for the majority of players, you'll probably want a shield solely for the ease of play regardless of the damage loss. In terms of her damage in teams post buff, it's still fine like originally, solid but still not outright power creeping the best current 5-star power DPS teams like Hu Tao and Linny. If you want to know how much the buff actually increased her damage, I recommend checking out an actual theory crafter that will do the job way better than I ever could. I think Jason and TGS has already done the calcs on it. I would be happy with more buffs for Arlecchino, and I think there's plenty of room for more. Personally, I would love to see resistance to interruption added to her kit. That way you don't have to be forced to run a shield to actually feel good playing her, and that will kind of make up for some of the potential DPS loss that she'll gain when playing her in practice. And also another way that they could increase her damage other than just increasing the multipliers is maybe add some attack buffs in her kit, as at the current moment a lot of her damage potential is tied to Bennett because she's an attack scaling carry and she doesn't have any attack buffs. So that attack buff from Bennett is very beneficial to her actual damage. Now whether or not that will happen, we shall see in the upcoming weeks. Hope you enjoyed this rundown of Arlecchino's first beta changes. Like, comment, subscribe, classic YouTuber recommendations, feel free to do them, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.